Rob Lowe walked onto that stage in Chicago knowing his career was over. It was March 15, 1990, and the first time he'd faced a live audience in 18 months. 18 months since the scandal that destroyed everything he'd built. The lights hit his face and he heard something that made his blood run cold. Not applause. Not cheers. Just silence. Dead, brutal silence. And then, from somewhere in the darkness, a single voice yelled 4 words that would either destroy him completely or save his life forever. To understand what happened that night at the Blackstone Theater, you need to understand how far Rob Lowe had fallen. In 1988, he was one of the biggest stars in Hollywood. The golden boy of the Brat Pack. The face that launched 1,000 magazine covers. He'd starred in The Outsiders, St. Elmo's Fire, and About Last Night. Rob Lowe was 24 years old, impossibly handsome, and the world was his. Directors wanted him. Studios fought over him. Women threw themselves at him. Rob Lowe was living the dream that every actor in America wanted. Money, fame, and a future so bright it was blinding. And then, in one catastrophic moment during the 1988 Democratic National Convention in Atlanta, Rob Lowe made a decision that would turn him into a punchline overnight. He met 2 women at a nightclub. One was 22. The other was 16, though she'd lied about her age using a fake ID. They went back to his hotel room. Someone had a video camera. What happened next became the first celebrity sex tape scandal in history, years before Paris Hilton, years before Kim Kardashian, back when something like this could actually end your career permanently. The tape leaked. Within 48 hours, Rob Lowe went from America's heartthrob to America's punchline. Jay Leno opened his show with Rob Lowe jokes. Letterman did a top 10 list about him. SNL did a brutal sketch. The tabloids were merciless. Every headline, every talk show, every radio DJ had the same target, Rob Lowe. But the jokes weren't the worst part. The worst part was watching his career disintegrate in real time. Movie offers evaporated overnight. Studios that had courted Rob Lowe stopped returning calls. Directors who'd begged to work with him suddenly had scheduling conflicts. Producers who'd promised Rob Lowe leading roles cast other actors. Rob Lowe was toxic, untouchable, finished. But what Rob Lowe didn't know was that his lowest moment would become the foundation of his greatest comeback. He checked himself into rehab in Arizona. Not because the scandal involved drugs or alcohol, but because Rob Lowe needed to disappear. 6 months in a facility called Sierra Tucson, doing group therapy, staring at desert sunsets, trying to piece together what was left of his life. His mother visited every week. Barbara Lowe was a small woman with kind eyes and iron will. She drove 3 hours each way from Los Angeles. She'd sit across from Rob Lowe in the visitor's room and hold his hands. "Mom, I ruined everything," Rob said during one visit. "No," Barbara said firmly. "You made a mistake. There's a difference. The whole world saw it. Then let the whole world see how you come back from it." But Rob Lowe didn't know how to come back. In January 1990, Meyer Gottlieb called. Meyer was Rob Lowe's agent, a short man with thick glasses and a Brooklyn accent that got stronger when he was nervous. "Rob, I got something," Meyer said. "Theater. Chicago. A streetcar named Desire. They want you for Stanley." Rob Lowe laughed bitterly. "Theater? Meyer, I'm a movie star." "You were a movie star," Meyer corrected. "Right now, you're an unemployed actor. This director, Patricia Carroll, believes in you. She doesn't care about the scandal." Rob Lowe was quiet. "How many seats?" 400. 400 people staring at me for 2 hours, judging me. "Or 400 people watching you act," Meyer said. "Rob, you're one of the most talented actors I've ever represented. But talent doesn't mean shit if you're too scared to use it. This is your shot. Are you gonna take it or not?" Rob Lowe closed his eyes. "When do rehearsals start?" Rob Lowe flew to Chicago in February. The city was freezing, wind cutting through his coat. The other actors were professionals, theater veterans. They knew who Rob Lowe was. They knew about the scandal, but they treated him with quiet respect. The director, Patricia Carroll, was a woman in her 50s with gray hair pulled back in a tight bun and eyes that missed nothing. On the first day, she pulled Rob Lowe aside. "I don't care about your past," Patricia said. "I care about Stanley Kowalski. Can you give me Stanley?" "I'll try." "Don't try. Do it. You've got the rage for it. I can see it in your eyes. You're angry at the world right now. Good. Use that." Rehearsals were brutal. Patricia pushed Rob Lowe harder than any director ever had. "Deeper," she'd yell. "Stanley isn't playing at being angry. He is angry. Show me." One afternoon, Rob Lowe broke down in the middle of a scene. He wasn't crying as Stanley. He was crying as himself. All the shame, all the humiliation, it came pouring out. Patricia walked onto the stage. "That," she said quietly, "that's what I need. That rawness. That truth." But outside the theater, Rob Lowe couldn't escape reality. Photographers followed him. People whispered. One afternoon, he was buying coffee when he heard two women behind him. "That's him," one whispered. "The sex tape guy. I heard he's doing some play. Like that's gonna save his career." Rob Lowe paid for his coffee and left without looking back. But their words burned. The preview performances started March 10th, small crowds, mostly theater regulars. Rob Lowe got through them on pure adrenaline. The audiences were polite but distant. They clapped at the right moments. But Rob Lowe could feel them watching him with curiosity, not engagement. They weren't seeing Stanley Kowalski. They were seeing Rob Lowe, the scandal, trying to act. Opening night was March 15th. That morning, Rob Lowe woke up in his hotel room and stared at himself in the bathroom mirror. His eyes were hollow. His hands were shaking. He picked up the phone and called Meyer. "Meyer, I can't do this. Rob, they're not going to give me a chance. They've already decided who I am." Meyer sighed. "You're right, some of them have. But Rob, the ones who matter, the ones who actually give a damn about art and talent, they're sitting in that theater tonight waiting. They're waiting to see if you're gonna stand up or stay down. Don't rob them of that moment. What if I fail? Then you fail. But at least you'll fail trying. That's better than hiding." At 6 p.m., Rob Lowe arrived at the Blackstone Theater. Sold out. 400 tickets, all gone. He stood backstage listening to the audience file in, and his heart was pounding. Patricia found him in his dressing room. "You ready?" "No." "Good. Stanley isn't ready either. Use that." She studied his face. "Rob, tonight you need to be brave. What if they want me to fail?" Patricia smiled. "Then prove them wrong." At 7:30 p.m., the lights went down. Rob Lowe stood in the wings wearing Stanley's torn t-shirt and jeans. The stage manager gave him a 5-minute warning. Rob Lowe took a deep breath. This was it, his comeback. In 90 minutes, he would either resurrect his career or bury it forever. The curtain rose. The opening scene played out, and then it was Rob Lowe's entrance. He walked onto the stage, into the lights. The first thing he noticed was the silence. A good audience breathes with the performance. They react, they engage. But this audience was holding its breath, waiting, judging. Rob Lowe delivered his first line. His voice was strong, confident. He'd rehearsed this 1,000 times. But he could feel their skepticism like a physical weight pressing down on him. The first act continued. Rob Lowe threw himself into the performance, channeling all his rage and shame and fear into Stanley. When the act ended and the lights went down, the applause was polite, respectful, but not enthusiastic. Patricia appeared beside him. "You're in your head. Get out of your head. They're not with me. Then make them be with you. Stop performing for them. Perform for yourself." Act 2 began. Rob Lowe pushed harder, trying to force the audience to feel something. But the harder he pushed, the more the walls seemed to grow. He could see it in their faces. 400 people watching him with polite interest but no real engagement. And then came the scene that changed everything. Stanley's breakdown. The moment where all his bravado collapses and you see the broken, desperate man underneath. Rob Lowe was mid-monologue, his voice cracking, when suddenly, from the back of the theater, someone yelled, "We believe in you, Rob." Time stopped. The entire audience turned to look. Rob Lowe froze on stage, his hand halfway through a gesture, his mouth open mid-word. The lights seemed brighter suddenly. The stage felt like it was tilting. And in that moment, everything Rob Lowe had been carrying, the shame, the fear, the desperate need to prove himself, came crashing down. Then another voice, this time from the middle section, "You're not just the scandal. Show us who you are." And then a third voice, an older man near the front, "Give us everything you've got." Something inside Rob Lowe broke open. All the fear, all the shame, it came flooding out. He looked directly at the audience, still in character but somehow also completely himself, and he roared Stanley's next line with a rawness that shook the walls. The audience gasped. And then, for the first time that night, they leaned forward. They were with him now. The wall had crumbled. For the next 45 minutes, Rob Lowe gave the performance of his life. He wasn't just playing Stanley Kowalski. He was exorcising his demons on that stage. Every line was a confession. Every gesture was an act of defiance. He was fighting for his career, fighting for his reputation, fighting to prove that Rob Lowe was more than the worst moment of his life. When the final curtain fell, there was a moment of absolute silence. Rob Lowe stood center stage, breathing hard, sweat pouring down his face. And then the audience exploded. 400 people rose to their feet. The applause was deafening, primal. People were crying. People were shouting. Rob Lowe stood there, overwhelmed, tears streaming down his face. The standing ovation lasted 7 minutes. Patricia grabbed his hand in the curtain call. "That," she whispered, "is who you really are." After the show, Rob Lowe sat in his dressing room, still in costume, staring at his reflection. There was a knock at the door. "Come in," Rob Lowe said. He expected Meyer or Patricia. Instead, it was a young woman, maybe 19, with tears in her eyes and a Northwestern University sweatshirt. She was small, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. "I'm so sorry to bother you," she said, "but I was the one who yelled from the back." Rob Lowe stood up. "You were. I just wanted you to know, I didn't come here tonight to see Rob Lowe the scandal. I came here to see Rob Lowe the actor. And you were incredible. Thank you for not giving up." Rob Lowe couldn't speak. He just nodded. The girl turned to leave. "Wait," Rob Lowe said. "What's your name?" "Sarah. Sarah Connolly." "Sarah, why did you do that? Why did you yell?" Sarah looked down at her hands. "Because I know what it's like to be judged for one mistake. And I know what it's like to need someone to believe in you." She looked up at him. "I needed you to be okay tonight. Because if you could come back, maybe I could too." After Sarah left, Rob Lowe broke down completely. All the pain and fear and shame of the last 18 months came pouring out. But this time, the tears weren't from despair. They were from relief, from hope. The next morning, the Chicago Tribune ran a review. The headline read, "Rob Lowe gives stunning performance in Streetcar, this is acting." Richard Christensen wrote, "Forget everything you think you know about Rob Lowe. Last night at the Blackstone Theater, we witnessed the birth of a serious actor." Other papers picked up the story. The New York Times sent a critic to Chicago. Entertainment Weekly ran a feature, "Rob Lowe's Redemption, How Theater Saved a Fallen Star." Suddenly, the narrative was changing. People weren't talking about Rob Lowe the scandal anymore. They were talking about Rob Lowe the actor. Rob Lowe stayed in Chicago for the entire 6-week run. Every single performance sold out. Word of mouth spread across the city. People weren't coming to see the sex tape guy anymore. They were coming to see an actor reclaim his career. And every night, Rob Lowe gave them everything he had. Meyer flew to Chicago for the closing night. After the show, he and Rob Lowe went to a diner on State Street. They ordered coffee and pie, and Meyer looked at Rob Lowe with genuine pride. "You did it, kid. You really did it." "I'm not out of the woods yet," Rob Lowe said. "No," Meyer agreed, "but you're not in the grave either. And that's what matters." In 1999, 9 years after that night in Chicago, Rob Lowe was cast as Sam Seaborn in The West Wing. The show became one of the biggest on television. Rob Lowe earned an Emmy nomination. His career had fully resurrected. He went on to star in Parks and Recreation, became a best-selling author, and built a legacy based on his work, not his mistakes. But Rob Lowe never forgot that night at the Blackstone Theater. In interviews, he often talked about it. "That was the night I learned that people want to see you succeed," Rob Lowe said. "They want to forgive you if you're willing to do the work. But you have to meet them halfway. You have to show them you're worth believing in." In 2015, Rob Lowe returned to the Blackstone Theater for a special charity performance. The theater had been renovated, but the stage was the same. Before the show, Rob Lowe stood center stage alone and closed his eyes. He could still hear that voice from the back row, "We believe in you, Rob." He opened his eyes and smiled. "Thank you," Rob Lowe whispered to the empty theater. "Thank you for not giving up on me." Sarah Connolly, the woman who'd yelled that night, eventually tracked Rob Lowe down through social media. She wrote him a letter explaining that she'd been dealing with depression and had been fighting to stay in college while everyone told her to quit. Seeing Rob Lowe fight for his comeback that night had inspired her to keep fighting too. "You saved yourself that night," Sarah wrote. "But you also saved me. You showed me that one mistake doesn't have to be the end of the story. It can be the beginning of a better one." Rob Lowe framed that message and hung it in his office. It reminds him that redemption isn't about erasing your mistakes. It's about showing people who you are when everything's been stripped away. It's about standing on a stage, vulnerable and terrified, and giving everything you've got anyway. That's the real Rob Lowe story, not the scandal, not the comeback. The moment in between when he had to decide whether to run or fight. When 400 people in a Chicago theater watched Rob Lowe choose to fight. And when one voice from the darkness gave him permission to be human again. Because that's what we all need sometimes. Not perfection, not invincibility, just someone brave enough to stand up after they've fallen and show us that second chances are possible. That's not just a comeback story, that's a blueprint for how to survive when the world decides you're finished. Rob Lowe walked onto that stage in 1990 as a punchline. He walked off as an actor. And the distance between those two things was measured in courage, sweat, and the willingness to look Rob Lowe's demons in the eye and refuse to blink.